Hello, peers. So I did the topic of learning disabilities for the diversity and inclusion. And I just wanted to briefly go over a little bit before I go too deep into my topic. So I wanted to briefly say what a learning disability is. So, a learning disability is a disorder that affects the ability to understand or use spoken written language to do like mathematical calculations, to coordinate movements, or direct attention. So the next thing that I briefly want to talk about is this timeline that I have found. And it gives a brief overview of the learning disability history, and I'll kind of briefly show you these pictures, and then I want to talk specifically about a couple of points, and then we'll move on to my next thing. Okay. So the first thing that I specifically wanted to talk about was this picture right here that shows a picture of a brain. So the brain research became the foundation of the field of learning disabilities, and terms such as brain injured child was first used by Alfred Stratus and Lauren Laheyton. The term then changed from brain injured child to minimal brain dysfunction and then learning disabilities. This was all between 1930 to 1960. This picture shows right here the first public school programs for learning disabilities, and it was established in Syracuse University in New York in 1960. This picture right here shows a picture of the Palmer House, which is in Chicago, and this point right here briefly just talks about how the term learning disabilities was introduced to a small group of parents here in Chicago. And it was proposed by Dr. Samuel A. Kirk, and he was known as the father of learning disabilities. And then this one right here, it talks about the Rehabilitation Act in 1973. It was a landmark of civil rights law that was passed. And then this point right here, the Education for All Handicapped Children, or the EHA, was reauthorized in 1990, and it was changed to the Individuals with Learning Disabilities. Changed to Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or the IDEA. This right here talks about the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA. It was passed in 1990. It protects individuals with disabilities from discrimination in employment, and it was ensured by George H.W. Bush. And then I wanted to talk about the No Child Left Behind. It was passed in 2001. And then lastly, we'll go to this point down here, the ESSA, or the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, was reauthorized and renamed to Every Student Succeeds Act. And it was moved to reauthorize from Congress, and it recommended that students with learning disabilities receive access to general education curriculum to maintain students with disabilities as a specific subgroup for accountability purposes. So what are your students going to need? First they're going to need self-awareness. Students in your classroom should be aware of what they can do all of the time. They can even be reminded of what their weaknesses might be, and you as their teacher will help improve them on those weaknesses. The next thing that they're going to need is proactivity. Your students should be proactive in their own learning. They will be actively engaged in the world around them. They will know what they need to succeed and build up the confidence to ask for help if needed. They're also going to need to set goals in your classroom. If your students set goals for themselves, their approaches to their learning is going to be successful. They will have a plan set out and steps to accomplish that plan. And finally, they are going to need a social support system. Your students need a support system. They're going to need someone outside of the classroom that's going to help them when needed and encourage them through this whole process of their learning experience. The next topic that I want to talk about is the challenges that students with learning disabilities can face. So, when outsiders are looking in, and even some teachers think of students with learning disabilities, they think of children who struggle with like mathematics or with reading skills. But these aren't the only challenges that these students can face. Some students have challenges with social cues, socializing with other students, making friends, and misinterpreting body language. One thing that many people think about with learning disabilities is children who talk too much, talking at the wrong times, and saying inappropriate things. Because of these things, students are more likely to get rejected by their peers, unfortunately. Because of this, it can lead into other challenges that these students can face. For example, low test scores, bad behaviors, missed school days, and feelings of failure. This doesn't all have to do with rejection of peers, but these factors do play a big part in these challenges for these students.